We are live. Hi, everybody at the What's on Elephant Castle Facebook community. I'm Nick from Retribe, and joining me today is, I'm going to say it, Dr. Russ Cowley, senior lecturer at Birmingham University, also professional ice hockey player, a man who I've known for, I'm trying to think, Russ, when it would have been in Coventry at Sky
Early
Sports.
2000s. Early
Maybe,
2000s.
yeah, early 2000s, or maybe even around 2010. Like 20,
Would
when
it
we
be
were doing
that? I
that
would
era.
have thought earlier, but yeah, you could be right.
Okay, I think that's the last time, would have been around the 2010, 2011 time. Yeah, when I was working with Dave Sims and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but buddy, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah,
Good, thank you.
I wanted to use the doctor because you are a professional athlete, and you've put a lot of work into your life outside of sport, which is still in sport. And I just think it's really cool when a guy who has been in the trenches, up and down the boards, playing the game, up early, the sacrifices that it takes
Yeah,
to play a hockey, but also gets the DR before his name. Like as soon as I saw that, like years ago, I was so proud of you.
appreciate it.
So
Thank you.
that's why I wanted to use it anyway. But
I appreciate it.
can you explain to people a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So, long story short, parents are both English. They moved to Canada when they were in their about mid-20s. I think they moved over. Myself, I was born there, and my brother and sister too. And as you well know, Nick, in Canada, you're born with a pair of skates on. So yeah, I just got into hockey that way. Moved to England when I was 9 the first time, and I was back here for 4 years. And believe it or not, Toma was one of my coaches, and I think it was under 12 or under 14s level. Believe it
Right.
or not.
Yeah.
Then I went back to Canada for 2 years with my family, and then I came back when I was 15, 16, and I've been back since. And yeah, the hockey, hockey was my life. I ate, breathe, sleep hockey. So it was something I always wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity. And we all know, like, in the early days, your family are the reason for that. My dad driving me up and down the
Right.
country at ridiculous hours, and then fortunately enough, from Swindon, I was able to join Coventry, and the rest is history, as they say, from a hockey point of view.
So what about the integration of being in Coventry and wanting or the need to think about a career or a life after hockey?
Yeah, and I guess for me, when I think back, it was 2003 that I started the university degree. At the time, and I believe I'm right in saying so, Coventry was the first and the only one that had a university
Mhm.
deal. And as
Mhm.
you know, I think every team in the Elite League has one now, and it's a great recruitment tool. So for me, I remember the opportunity was there, and I was talking about it, and I remember talking with my parents too, and they were like, you'd be silly not to do it. And I got to be honest, at that time, in my head, I was still like, studying wasn't really a focus for me. Not that I didn't want to do it. It's just, I just wanted to play hockey. So I'm kind of glad that I got that nudge, because after a couple of years, I started to think like, I actually enjoy this. I'm learning. Um, I got a sense of, hockey's not going to last forever. And once I finished my undergrad, I always knew in my head then, I'm like, yeah, I want to do a master's. So I obviously waited, and I did a master's in 2008. So I went to Cardiff prior to that, and I came back to Coventry. Um, I was speaking with both Cardiff and Coventry at the time. Cardiff at the time, I believe, was a 2-year program. Coventry was one. So I found that was a better fit. Plus, I enjoyed my time in Coventry. So fortunate enough, I came back. I was able to study with Neil Martin and James Pease. So two beauties. And it was nice to have those guys on the course too, familiar faces. And to put it in perspective, Coventry was a very good university in being able to understand that we're not going to make every class.
Mhm.
And so they were quite supportive. And yeah, after a year, I got my master's, and then I started to teach. So just on a part-time basis, as you know, hockey, we'd be in the gym on the ice done by about midday. So I used to have a couple of classes during each semester where I'd run those, And yeah, good
It's
times.
it is. It's such a similar story to mine. You know, both my mom and dad are from the UK, from
Yeah,
South Yorkshire, and they immigrated to Saskatchewan in the 60s when there was a shortage of teachers, and I
right.
was born out there. And I do remember my very first time on the ice down in Pontiac, Saskatchewan, with a set of bob skates on. And you know, my dad in a school system, he used to coach basketball against Brian Trottier, and
No
you know,
way.
it's such a cool little hockey
Yeah,
community. And then moving to Saskatoon, and you know, it was at a very early age that my dad was saying, you know, you've got a British passport, you can go to the UK. You know, you're not going to be a star player or anything because you know, in
yeah,
Saskatoon, I was just a grinder, and and he was like, go over there, see what could happen, but get a degree.
yeah,
You know, use hockey as a way so you can get yourself into a university to get a degree.
yeah.
Which I did. I did an undergrad in English literature and history at Winchester University while I was playing
That's something I didn't
for
know. I didn't know that.
yeah.
We've not had that conversation before, you and I.
No,
Over the
yeah,
years.
I did that while I was playing with the Isle of Wight and also with
Yeah.
the Guildford Flames. So,
Okay.
and I know part of the recruitment when I went to the Guildford Flames was that this is a young kid who's going to school, and I know that Darren Zinger, who unfortunately is no longer with us,
No.
he was doing, what was he doing? Law, I think, at Kingston University.
Okay.
So it was the two of us at Guildford, and they really promoted it to the youth of like, look at these guys, they're playing sport, but they're also doing, you know, further education so that they can think about life outside of hockey.
Yeah.
And I know that it's something that not a lot of people really, even today, everyone's thinking, I'm going to play football, I'm going to play rugby or cricket, and I'm going to make it. And there's not a lot of emphasis on this, the idea of you've probably got a better chance of winning the lottery than, you know, making it to the premiership in football.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's funny because I was at Brunel University yesterday speaking this to the sports psychologists, and we're always on this conversation of what is sport, you know, what is sport culture, what does it mean to our society of playing sport but also doing other things, and why do we play sport, you
Sure.
know, and this idea of like, is everybody who's playing sport trying to be the best of the best, or are we, you know, when's the enjoyment, where's the fun,
Yeah.
when did that? And one of the kids, sorry, I shouldn't say that, one of the young psychologists said to me after, Nick, did you like, or did you love playing, you know, professional sports in the UK? And it really took me back. I was like, huh, because I really loved playing on an outdoor rink
Of
in
course.
Canada
Of course.
with me and my buddy till like 9 o'clock at night, where our fathers would come and get us and they'd give us. I loved it then. You know, we were making up our own games on the rink
Yeah.
and bouncing balls off of crossbars and stuff. And I loved it.
Of
But
course.
it was hard for me to say that when had all this success on the Isle of Wight or when I was playing in Guildford that I really loved it.
Yeah.
And that's this kind of thing of, you know, why do we play sport? So have you ever struggled with loving the game and thinking about life after sport, and where was the enjoyment of playing?
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt about it. I remember when I retired in 2017, I wasn't particularly enjoying it to the capacity that I think I did at times. And I think it's safe to say that when I look back on my career, there are periods of time where we go through rough patches, right? For whether it's something to do with being a hockey player, the confidence in yourself, or the all the noise that's on the outside of you playing the game, you know, in people's personal life. So I think there's certainly times that I can, you know, definitely look back on. And I think that what you just said, actually, it's funny how it's such a simple question, but it's probably like, you know, you said the one, was it a student that asked you that question? And it's probably one you've not been asked. And it does make you sit back and think, oh, that's a good question. And to be honest, yeah, there's times where, you know, I haven't enjoyed it. One thing I will say, going back to what you're saying about whether taking any sport and being young, I mean, hindsight, we all know, would be an absolute wonderful thing. But when I look back to how I was in terms of my mindset between, say, 18 and 23, uh, geez, it's not even a thought. What am I going to do after hockey? And for
Mm.
some, that's how it remains. And I think, does there need to be a better narrative in any sport of you know, when you get to this stage, what are you going to do? Because there's a lot of people, and we see it through, you know, I listen to some hockey podcasts, and some guys struggle because something that's been their life for sort of 20, 30 years is no longer there anymore. And it massive culture shock, right? And we don't have the experience to deal with that when you get to that point. And that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is like when people are playing sport like I did, it became part of my identity. Was I was an athlete. I wasn't like an ace of one, or I was kind of like a jack of all trades. And I played sport for many different reasons. There was the enjoyment side of it, but it was also a way to get my father's approval, or to get me out of the house, which was sometimes a very unpleasant place for me.
Right.
But sport was intrinsically woven in my identity. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily playing a sport where, yeah, you know, I got paid a little bit of money to play, so you could consider it professional, but it was more kind of semi-pro or something like that.
Yeah.
But when I stopped playing, it wasn't that. It was a couple of things. It was the camaraderie and the accountability that I had. That was the big thing that I missed. But it was also this thing of like, all of a sudden I went from playing sport to being like a live sports broadcaster.
Yeah.
And Russ, I felt like a fraud, man. Like, I'm like, I've got no training for this. All of a sudden I'm in front of a camera, and this gave me these huge fear and inferiority complex, and like just being like an imposter.
Yeah.
And I can only stress that, like, that to people, is to watch why we use sport and how it become woven into our identity, because we are far more than just an athlete. You know, we
Yeah.
are human beings, right? With like so
Totally.
many different diverse personalities and purposes. And that, I think, is, like you say, it is a huge problem when you use sport as your identity, and then all of a sudden you're forced to retire through injury or age, or something happens, and then it's like, who am I now? You know?
Yeah. I, to be honest, you know what stood out from what you were just talking about there, what stood out for me is, you know, sometimes you know, and I've had it in my lifetime for sure, perhaps even more recently, but going to the rink has been my release, and that's my getaway, as in you're around a group of guys you like, you're enjoying it. So it's almost like your safe haven, if you like. But then what happens when that no longer is, or there's a period of time where that no longer is your safe haven? And that's also when people are in their career where, you know, doesn't matter where you go, you're not escaping perhaps something you need to escape if the rink is no longer that. And that's where I think, you know, as much as we're talking about the end of the career, which is highly important, you know, I guess sometimes it happens to people to get in a bad place during it, right? But no, you're absolutely right. It's interesting to hear you say that about with the Sky Sports gig, because always watching you, it's almost like you've done it since you were 5 years old. You know what I mean? Like, perhaps you're a natural in front of the camera, and the way you speak, and, you know, you always improvise well. So, you know, whether you felt that way, it didn't come across that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the thing of being, I was very good at faking it, but inside, dude, I was an absolute mess. And it ended up, you know, where I started to turn to, you know, unhealthy ways to deal with that stress. And there's only, you know, I'm not saying everybody ends up doing what I did, but, you know, leaning on alcohol was a solution at the time, and it ended up, you know, almost killing me.
Sure.
But, you know, and I think this is it, is that we live a life of transforming and always evolving. And I think that for parents and coaches and even athletes to pigeonhole yourself or compartmentalize yourself into, I am going to be this athlete, or when I'm done, I'm going to be, you know, a senior lecturer at university, and then and then I'm going to have a family, and then I'm going to retire, and then it's so hard to have these expectations put upon us when, you know, I'm living proof at 51 years old, almost 51, that, man, life is ebbs and flows and takes you in like completely different directions than you thought you could. And just to open yourself up to being curious about what life has to offer, and not just say, I'm going to be Nick the athlete, or Nick the TV guy, or so. I'm just going to be Nick, you know, and I'm just going to show up and not put all those pressures of what parents and coaches and teachers put upon us, and they have for decades, right? I mean, did you
I,
find that when you were growing up? Did you find a lot of pressure from people like, growing up in Edmonton to be like, you got to be this and you got to be that? And
well, I actually grew up in Vancouver, so when I was one, we moved to Vancouver. So
okay.
I don't recall Edmonton, but no, I don't actually. Growing up, especially in my teenage, maybe even young 20s, I was my own worst enemy in terms of confidence in my own ability, to be honest.
Mm,
um, Over time that became better for me. I guess with age and experience, you come to a point where you realize what you're capable of, what your strengths are, and what for me, from a hockey perspective, I knew what my role was. You know, for Coventry, I could play anywhere. I wasn't like your out and out goal scorer or your playmaker or your stay at home D man. I could play in any position on any line with anyone, and I would support that role. And obviously, the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my career, I played D. Even though I had signed as a forward. One year I signed as a D, the other four I was signed as a forward. I played pretty much 90% of the games on D because we would lose
mm,
guys through injury, and I'd fill in. And I didn't mind that. I knew that was my role. But I think in my early career, yeah, it was probably, when I look back now, I wonder, and I see it in so many guys now that, you know, would a sports psychologist been good for me for the capacity to make me have more belief in what I'm capable of? Does that make sense?
mm.
So maybe that is something that would help me. I didn't feel like I had pressure though when I was younger, up until I started, just before pro kind of thing.
Mm.
That I didn't have any pressure, and my family didn't give me pressure. They were always supportive, and yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess I was lucky in that sense. But seeing the environment that kids are in today, um, it's worrisome because I think there's a lot more pressures now than there was before. And there's a few factors that drive that, and I'm sure you're probably aware of them. Um, but yeah, the
Mm.
generations are a lot different. Gen Zs are a lot different to what we were.
Yeah, I think when I refer to pressure, I refer to it as kind of ideologies or
Okay.
expectations.
Yeah.
Not so much like you've got to do this and you got to do that. It's kind of like, if you are to be seen as successful, you need to have a university degree. And
Right.
if you are to, then you have to have a trade like a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, or, you have to, and these are all levels of like what society or commercials at the time or movies at the time were putting on. That's what I kind of mean by pressure. It's like, and
Mhm.
now I love what you're saying is that today kids have got this stuff, and you need to look a certain way, and the body dysmorphia and the images of what people need to be is seen as successful. That is a load of, again, it's like this pressure of what society says what it's going to take for you to look like you're successful.
Absolutely. I know, and that to me, like you just said, it's a tangible thing, and it's, I guess, an element of cultural relativism. Well, if this person's got a nice car, then they must be doing something right, or a good job, or wealthy. Um, and obviously, we know it's the intangible things that actually make a difference in life, to
Yeah.
relationships. The whether it's your family support or love, no one can see it, but
Mm.
if there's love there, it's way more valuable than anything else
Yeah.
that you can see, I guess, if that makes sense from a tangible point of view.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it like takes guys like our age to kind of, well, I think I'm about 10 or 11, 12 years older than you. Yeah, you're 38, right?
38, yeah,
So
I'm 38,
yeah,
so you're right there.
yeah,
Good
well, I'm
math.
almost
Good math there.
almost 13, 13 years older than you. But it's like kind of this thing of like saying to youngsters, if I say to a youngster, hey, take it easy, don't be so hard on yourself, you got to just kind of trust me that in my experience, things can unfold like this. And they're like, yeah, whatever, man. They just don't, they just are in it the way I was in it. And it feels like, I think it's amazing to have experience of older folk trying to, different generations trying to tell us not to, to fear so many things. But when you're in it, you're in it. And I think everybody needs to, I think this is why it needs to be just gentle love and compassion that we need to hold towards each other, especially in these traditionally masculine environments like ice hockey. You know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of area for compassion for people. And it's like, even like a lot of the haters that came up with, what's happened with Carey Price with Montreal. And,
Of course.
it's this kind of need for us to go, oh, someone has shown some kind of weakness, so we got to pick on it to
Yeah.
kind of dispel our own inner insecurities, right? If
Yes.
someone else is suffering, I got to go launch on it because I don't want anyone to know that I'm suffering.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
divert, right? It diverts. I'm
Yeah.
insecure about something about myself or something alike, and we'll project it onto somebody else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So I think that God, this is what I like to do, Russ, is to be able to talk to athletes and to men and in particularly about compassion and holding compassion for ourselves so that we can hold compassion for other people.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that if we can do this in sports communities, I think it's going to soften. And by soften, I don't mean weaken. I mean like not be so harsh, restrict, with ourselves and hard on ourselves, so that we
Yeah.
can, even show emotions in ways that we were taught not to show emotions.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing when we talk about, you just said it, with different generations, we were used to how, the environment we grew up from a hockey perspective. Um, and and like I say, when you look at things now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek.
Oh, I know the name, but I'm not.
Yeah, really good motivational speaker. And he
Yeah.
was talking about, I guess, the factors that with Generation Z and the risks of where they're going to be when they become in their sort of midlife, if you like, um, because of the level of impatience that they have, the environment they live in. You just said technology, all these things. Research was done that social media has the same effect as things like alcohol, smoking, gambling, because it makes our body release dopamine, which is the same when we drink, when we smoke, and it's addictive. And that's what
Mhm.
he's saying, that there's no I mean, they brought restrictions in now at a young age, but it's not going to probably stop what's going to eventually be an issue in the next sort of 15, 20 years.
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, with the social media, 2004 or 5, it came out.
Mhm.
So those people that are obviously absorbing it, when they get to their 35, 40, and statistics are going up in terms of rates of depression,
Mhm.
and the relationship with things like technology are high, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's what
It's
worries me, sorry, Nick, whether it's hockey players or not, that's what's
yeah.
worrisome.
No, I know you have two young children, and I think I see or I hear. I was listening to a Kyle Kingsbury podcast just before this morning, and the guy that he had on was talking about parents that are bragging about their kids being able to open up apps on their iPad when they're 4 or 5 years old, and he's like, "That's great. That's awesome that your kid can open up an app on an iPad or
Yeah.
another device."
Yeah.
But what other things are they losing? What other developmental skills or things that they're meant to be having, like playing in the mud or, trying to figure out how to put one block on top of another block.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely right.
yeah.
And
So
those
it's
things
this,
are what you're absolutely right. Those are
mm,
key. If you think about those key skills that that at that developmental stage, um, in a nutshell, I guess I'll give you an example. There's a thing that I sometimes do with my students when we're talking about human resources around sport business management, and we do this spaghetti game with marshmallows, and they got to build this tall tower. And one of the best performing set of people are kids in
mm,
kindergarten class, because of the developmental stage they're at, to be able to, you know, when we sort of move into adults, you get everyone starts thinking, right, I've got to solve this problem, and I've been shown, or I think this is the way I've got to do it.
mm,
Where as kids, they just stack, so that they're actually better than adults, even people with
yeah,
degrees, which is crazy,
yeah,
right? You just think, wow. But
yeah.
like you just said, I remember hearing a story of a young child that had an actual book in his hand, and he was trying to swipe the book rather than turn the page properly, because all he was used
Wow.
to was swiping on a
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah. Wow.
So
I feel bad for chuckling because I could just see this, but it's
yeah,
bad. Yeah, I shouldn't laugh, but yeah,
no, I see what you mean. Like,
no,
you wouldn't think of it, right? And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to hear. In sort of talking back with you and looking at what you guys do, I think it's wonderful. And with the hockey world, do you guys, with some of the teams, are some of the teams involved with you guys?
So we're starting out like it's funny like the um we're going to start kind of low level stuff. I think that, I've talked to some people, in the hockey community, but I think people are kind of wondering what's going on with it. We're fairly new with what we do, but we are doing a little thing at a 3-on-3 tournament down in Ozone in March.
Okay.
Where we're going to do 2 half-hour sessions and just kind of start to slowly introduce some of these concepts and ideas to a bunch of guys that are coming together for a 3-on-3 tournament. So they're to have fun and to relax. But hopefully we can supplant some of these kind of concepts around, this balance. That's what all Tough Through Tender is, which is a sports program that we've did. It's just a balance. It's not saying that, there is a time to be mentally strong and resilient, and then there's a time to be vulnerable. And you think, the two shouldn't go hand in hand, but really, if we can balance them both out, then who knows what kind of athletes and coaches and parents and people that we'll be able to produce. And that's our aim. So, we're going to start kind of grassroots level first, Russ, and then see how it grows. But it's really a program that can be implemented into anybody's personal life or a corporation or a team or an education program.
Sure. I think, I think when you say grassroots too, it makes me think that, and I have no doubt that this will be your sort of focus too, is maybe at the age group, the younger age groups with like the GB programs and things like that, with those that have the chance to make it elite from a sport perspective, of course, because I know it's not just the sport related, but that's your main focus. No, that's wonderful.
Thank you. It's like there's all stakeholders really in sport can be exposed to these principles and ideas. And I think it's really about creating a space of being curious, of going that, for my 50 years, I know that sport was built on the foundation of post-war volunteers who had been not brainwashed, but bombarded with these ideas of, we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll do till we die. This really, it was survival mode, right? These Churchill speeches. But because sports culture started to develop after that from people who came from the war, that's woven into even what kids are taught today, which is you hear, let's go through a wall for each other, do or die. And we put these huge kind of like war sayings into sport. And I think these are the things that if we can kind of challenge, let's not look back at the past. Let's try to look tomorrow and the future for solutions that we can implement today that again are going to create spaces where we don't want to create trauma. And for me, sport created trauma physically and mentally in my life. And I'm sure it's created it for you and for probably 100% of the guys who I've played sport with. They've had some physical trauma through injury, but also some mental trauma through abusive coaches or abusive teammates. And that can just be in, language used to harm people, when we would use homophobic slurs in changing rooms 20 years ago. And now we know as men are coming out, they would hear these slurs as being, I must be that, because they're using it in that kind of derogatory way.
Of course.
And I think it's about being able to create spaces where we go, let's not create trauma. Let's heal trauma and create well-rounded people who will have the tools and the skills to deal with the ups and downs that life always throws at us.
Yeah, I hear you. No, that makes total sense. Absolutely total sense. If only it were that easy how you make it sound, right? It is so complicated, but it's interesting you say about, again, going back to whether it's the dressing room, and we're seeing it come out multiple sports. Obviously recently, for example, with cricket, you saw what happened with cricket and things like that. And a lot of times some people don't realize the impact of, one tiny word. That's all it takes. And it can have a lifelong, or at least a certainly, a stage in someone's life. It will impact them for a period of time.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so I didn't intend this to be like a sales pitch for anything that we're doing. I want to get into your life.
I think it's great though. I think it's good to hear about it. You know what I mean? I think it's wonderful because I think it's needed. You know,
Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
and I only say that because of everything I've witnessed, which is pretty much the same as what you have. I mean, I was fortunate enough because I know you were going to ask me probably a little bit more about the studying. I didn't anticipate going into academia at all. I was probably the least academic out of my brother, sister, and me, and yet I'm the most qualified. Not the highest earner, I'd say, but you know what I mean. We laugh about it because I was literally like the more sporty, most sporty, that kind of thing. But in a nutshell, I was thinking I was going to go into like pharmaceuticals or consultancy. That's kind of where I saw myself. And then I just, seemed to fall into academia. And I think this is where I guess where I'm trying to go with this, Nick, is that I did my master's. I started doing some teaching because, as you know, in the UK, we're not paid in the summer. So it used to be a supplement of income that would obviously assist what I made from hockey. And I knew in 2014 there was an advertisement that came out for a PhD studentship, and I thought to myself, I'm teaching right now. I know I want to play hockey at least 3 more years, which is what that PhD was, 3 years full time. And I thought it's an opportunity that I can't pass up. I'm going to go for it. So I applied for the position, and I ended up getting it. But if I hadn't had academia or anything to fall into, I think I probably would have been in a bad place. And I think the transition when I did retire, because I'd been teaching while I'd been playing, I'd been doing my PhD while I've been playing, which I will say is hard because I started my PhD in 2014. Legitimately, I couldn't start it for 5 months because I was still teaching and playing. I asked them to push my start date and they couldn't, which I get it because they're bound through certain criteria. Then my daughter was born in Jan 15, and she had some issues with intolerance in the first 5 months. So probably it took me 4 years to do my PhD, but it would have taken me 3 had I not had some of those influences. But yeah, to cut a long story short, I think then when I retired, because of that transition of up in the morning, in the gym, on the ice, straight to university, at university till dinner time, that was my 5-day week. And because I'd been doing that for quite some time, it was a norm to me when I stopped hockey. What I will say to you physiologically, when I stopped hockey for the next 4 months, I had to hammer on my PhD because I was close to my completion date, which I couldn't pass. So I Christmas Eve, for example, I was sat in the library for 12 hours. And that was, you know what I mean? It's no one's fault. I did a full-time PhD while playing hockey. But because I'd stopped hockey and did nothing, didn't even go to the gym because I didn't have time. I had some major issues, like as in when I say major issues, like my digestive, like my stomach was hurting most days. And I think it's because I went from being so fully active to nothing. And then of course you can imagine if I'm working, typing, sat down, doing nothing, my joints were seizing up. I was eating garbage food, wasn't sleeping very well. And that for me could have easily spiraled into something worse, very easily, if that makes sense. But once I got my PhD, and I think transitioning for me was relatively okay, but I could see that if I didn't have that and all I knew was hockey, I could see, panic, anxiety set in. What am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? That kind of thing.
It's challenging, and I think that without, like, I look at kind of how we've evolved as a species, Russ. For this, the bodies that we sit in now are roughly like 10 to 20,000 years old, in terms of our evolution. But to get here, we needed to. Life wasn't easy, and I think that this is the if it was all good, sitting in a cave and eating some fruit and maybe killing an animal every once in a while and hanging out and just doing stuff in a cave, and that was we would have stayed there.
Yeah.
But because of our need to be challenged, our need to grow,
Of course.
We're presented with these opportunities. And I think that the message that anybody who might be listening to this who go like, oh, I don't want to do what Russ did. I don't want to sit in the library for 12 hours and have my joints seize up. But we need it. You know,
Of
we
course.
need to put ourselves through these times in our lives where we're challenging ourselves. Without challenging ourselves, we're just going to leave the dormant kind of big, wash myself with a rag on a stick kind of, you know, that's a Simpsons thing.
Yeah.
You know, these dormant lives that don't
Yeah.
present ourselves, because how did it feel? You know, when you look back now at those 4 years and the Christmas Eve and the sore joints and knowing that, yes, maybe you could have eaten a little bit better and you could have taken exercise, but the day that they presented you with Dr. Russell Cowely, what was that like?
There were times where in my PhD, like I felt like I wanted to quit. Like there's no doubt about it. I probably remember 4 clear-cut situations through those 4 years where I was like, oh, I can't do this. I'm going to quit. And I got to be honest, it's not in my nature to quit. I've never been that way natured. So realistically, I felt that way, but those feelings are real, right? They are real. So I guess I was never going to do it, but it still brought me down. But when I went to my defense, which was the Viva Voce, as they call it in full, there was 3 people in the room. It is the most nervous I had ever been, because 4 years of my life, and I got to say that there was various things going on during those 4 years that made it very hard. I won't go into them on here, but not, you know, some external things going on that made it very hard, including obviously, you know, a new child and things like that. That I think all that emotion that I'd experienced, whether it was a high or a low, like you do in sport, you know what it's like. You go through highs and lows, and my stomach, it was like a knife was in my stomach. You know, when you haven't eaten because you're too anxious and you get that pain, I think it's because the stomach acid and the anxiety, the butterflies just lead to like you getting a pain. I literally, for my vibe, was in so much pain in my stomach trying to hide it, but it was because I got so anxious. And I'm not normally much of an anxious person. Like you, we played hockey in front of sold out arenas of whether it's, you know, 15,000 people, not a problem, or a final, you go to a playoff final. It's the most nervous I've been. And you go in, you do quite a large chunk, and then you leave the room, and then they bring you back in. And I had a good feeling after the first, when they sent me out before they brought me back in, I had a good feeling because I could talk about my PhD better than someone could read it. Does that make sense? So, and that's why you have a defense, because sometimes you need to clarify and justify some of the things that you did. And it was awesome feeling. Yeah, really awesome feeling. I mean,
Yeah.
I just never knew I'd ever become, you know, a doctor. And it was short-lived. A week later, I kind of felt like I'm going to have so much time on my hands because of how much this took. Nope. Yeah, something always fills the hole, but it felt great. It felt great. Yeah.
I think I do remember your LinkedIn profile changing.
Right.
And yeah, me at the time going, wow, you know, like I feel it now. It's like I think about it in my head, because I think at the time, how long ago was it?
2018. I passed in 2018. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was in a fairly good spot in my life, and I think I could feel your joy, you know.
Right.
And I felt proud for you, because I'd
Did.
commentated on a few games, and I know what it's like to play hockey, and I know what it's like to get like an undergrad. I couldn't even imagine what it's like to get a PhD, but I was so proud of you, because I think that what you're doing, or what you have done and what you continue to do, is to show people that there is a way, and that you're honest and you're vulnerable about it. It isn't easy. But the rewards of being able to have a life and provide for your family in a way that you never thought you would far outweigh that feeling on that Christmas Eve, right? Of working the 12-hour, you know?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, so it's, in a way, Russ, it's hard for me to say, like, I want people to be motivated, you know, but it's that wonderful saying from a movie called The Power of One. And it's like, a waterfall begins with one drop of water.
Yeah.
And I think if people are thinking, oh, how I can't get a PhD, you know, but you can do some kind of night class, you know, or you can do something, you just to
You're
create
absolutely
some
right.
self-esteem for yourself to build a life that
Yeah.
you are worthy of.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the biggest barrier I can imagine for you is probably being able to alter people's perceptions and attitudes of, um, how do I put this? If I know this is a maybe an analogy that's different, but let's take a speed awareness commercial where you know how they came out at one point with those really bad ones where you actually saw what happened to the
Mm,
person in the car accident. They were really graphical.
yeah,
And they did that because it's the only way they can actually get people to realize if you speed, this is the end result. Because
mm,
without seeing that tangibility of what has happened, people are just going to continue speeding without any thought for the consequence because we've never experienced it. And
yeah,
this is the biggest barrier for you, I bet, is if you could sit down with a 20-year-old and say, this is what some people end up like.
mm,
And it's like, don't let it be you. And
yeah,
not saying it's going to be you, but if you don't, make sure that you monitor yourself, look at what you think you want to do, boost your skills, what you can do outside of hockey and things like that, then yeah,
yeah,
that cycle is going to continue for people, and that's kind of
yeah,
what nobody wants to see, right?
yeah. It is. You're right. It will continue as long as we keep thinking of going to the gym is so that I can attract a mate. Is
Yeah,
not why you go to the gym. You
yeah,
know, and we want to instill in people like I'm really glad that you talked about how it was for you when you weren't looking after your body with nutrition and exercise, and how important it is to look at these vessels that carry us around for 80
yeah,
or 90 years if we're lucky as sacred. You
yeah.
know, we've only got one of them. Why do we? And I did it the other day. I went and bought a cheeseburger from Five Guys,
I
and
do like Five Guys burgers. I got to be honest,
I got that gratification. Oh, I'm gonna tell you, I got a milkshake too. um
they're good as well.
yeah, they but you know, and I got this 5 minutes of gratification, but even I had to force the rest of the burger down because it just didn't fit right with me.
Yeah,
I've been working really hard at the way what I've been putting in my system, and I went for that instant gratification of I've just done a really good thing, so I'm now going to reward myself with a double cheeseburger. And I didn't, it didn't sit well with me because I
yeah,
knew I was putting something in my body that it was not conducive to the last month of healthy eating.
of course.
And I really have to reflect on it and go, you know, I've got a big surgery coming up with a hip replacement, and I want to be healthy. I want to be the recovery to be good. Why am I sticking this stuff in my body for instant
Yeah,
gratification? And I think it's hard, but I think is we need to be wary of how we treat our bodies.
I agree. I mean, so many people. You just said it there with the gym. You know, just off the top of my head, some of the factors that people will go to the gym to look healthy, gain weight, as in muscle, lose weight, meet people for social purposes. A lot of times, it's I'm going to go to the gym, and we go back to that cultural relativism about the way people look. I'm going to go to the gym because I want to look good on the outside. And
Mm,
so many people forget about the most important thing, which is the brain. And like you just said, part of the body.
yeah.
um, I mean, for people to have the right kind of, whether you want to call it counseling or something similar, healthy people should be doing the same thing, because healthy people go to the gym and they maintain that health. The
Yeah.
same as people with the brain. You know, those who are, if you like, even in a state of, whether you want to call it equilibrium health, maintain that, because
Mm,
it can slip. It can slip for all of us. We know that,
yeah.
right? So yeah, I guess
Balance.
that's where you guys come in. Really maintain
Yeah.
that balance.
We're running out of time, so we really didn't talk about what you're doing now with Milton Keynes. I know you're still playing in the
Yeah,
National League, and
yeah.
you know,
So
how are things going playing in the National League with Milton Keynes?
good. We've got a really good group of guys. I enjoy it because I go back to, I did retire obviously, and I didn't anticipate playing again. I got my teeth fixed, and everything like that. But we have a great group. I enjoy being around the guys, and I think I missed that.
Mm,
And going back to what I was saying to you, I think through some tough times, I think going back and being back at the rink was good for me.
yeah.
Um, and the travel maybe not so much. Sorry, I got a fly coming around me here. The travel not so much sometimes, probably because of my age. because I've lost a step, obviously, but sometimes I get out of the car and my back, I'm like, it takes me a second just to like straighten up here. Honestly, it really does.
Yeah.
But then once my body moves up, okay. And I'm sure you've been there at some point where you're,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
long travel after a game and you're just like, oh my God, I'm so tight.
Yeah. I'm actually looking forward to this weekend because I'm gonna watch you.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking
Very
forward to
much
it.
so.
I hope that I have a seat that's on an aisle because I need to escape to the bathroom. I get nervous watching hockey, so I go pee 2 or 3 times
Do
during a
you
period.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it's
Maybe,
funny. Yeah.
maybe it's nostalgia for you, brings you back to the feelings you had when you played. I don't
Maybe
know.
it's a,
Just a
yeah.
thought.
I went to take the boys to a game at Alexander Palace a month ago, and it was their first game live, and they absolutely loved it. So the whole family is really looking
Yeah.
forward to getting in the car and coming to Milton
Okay.
Keynes. Milton Keynes, right, is the first full-size ice rink when it first opened up in 1990.
Okay.
Like when it was the Blade Runner, I think it was
Yeah.
1990. Yeah, and it opened up as the complex. I was the Zamboni driver there.
No way.
Yeah.
Have you
So
seen
when the
have you seen it recently since it's been
no, I haven't seen it since it's
Yeah.
been redone. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It looks a lot nicer, obviously.
Yeah.
What it
Is
was.
it still part of the bowling alley and the nightclub, or is it still?
I know that's all changed.
Is it?
That's
Oh
completely
wow.
changed. Yeah, there was a few different venues along that area that's all changed. There's a big Morrison's next door.
Yeah.
And there, you'll see when you come in, there's a bunch of different buildings going up now, like business
Yeah.
buildings. As you can imagine, a great location for people traveling in and out of London.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward
Um,
to it.
no, looking forward to
Just
catching up
make
with you.
sure, yeah, make sure I got an aisle seat. That's all.
I'll make sure of that.
Yeah. Five seats, one on an aisle, and we're good. Really looking forward to it, Russ. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really super
Pleasure.
appreciate it. I'm going to let you get back to your busy day, and I'll meet up with you maybe sometime on Saturday before or after the game or something.
Sounds good to
But
me.
we'll
Perfect.
talk before.
Of
Thank you
course
so
we
much
will. I'll
for
talk to you
joining me,
before.
Russ.
Thanks,
Beautiful, and
Nick. Great
thanks.
to talk to you.
Beautiful. And thanks everybody at the What's On at Elephant and Castle Facebook community. Don't forget to join me Thursday at 11 a.m. for a Tough 3 Tender workshop. We'll see you all then. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.